Welcome. This is Relationship Ready Talks. I really appreciate you coming. If you like this, subscribe and support, because we're trying to support and relate to each other. And we have a couple here today. Welcome, Scott and Lisa Feibush.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so tell us a little bit about you and what it is that the viewers and I should know about you before we talk about your relationship.
Well, we should probably start by explaining how we know you, which is that we all do stand-up comedy around Rochester. We've gotten to know each other that way.
Yep.
And we came fairly late to that. We started doing that. She started doing that
3 years ago in May.
Mm-hmm.
When she was turning 50, and
Yeah.
I looked at it and said, hey, this looks like fun. So that's been sort of a nice little spark in a relationship that actually started more than 30 years ago.
All right, excellent. So let's go back 30 years ago. Tell us about the beginning of your relationship.
I had just come back to college for my senior year from a year abroad. And I was actually in a relationship with somebody else who was not Jewish, out of school, and my parents didn't approve of the relationship.
Okay.
And the line I was always saying was, I dated 8 Jewish guys at Brandeis, and 4 were pigs, and 4 were better friends. So I think I've gone through the limit. And then I remember this was like a month before I started. My mom said, well, maybe you'll meet somebody when you get back to Brandeis. And I said, oh, come on, Mom, you want me to date a freshman? And she said, how do you know there won't be a transfer student? Scott had transferred to Brandeis the previous semester when I was still in France.
So your mom was predicting a little bit.
She kind of was,
happened,
yeah.
So okay.
So I had been at this unusual all-male school in California called Deep Springs, which is out in the middle of the desert, and that's a whole, we could talk for an hour about what that place was. It's sort of a unique educational institution that also includes work on a working cattle ranch and student self-government and just fascinating.
So given
place.
life experiences. And
Absolutely.
Stuff too.
So
Okay.
I went out there after skipping 2 years in school. I was 16 when I graduated from high school and went out there. I was there for a year. I was too young. It was not the greatest fit in the world. Left there after a year, came home, worked at a gas station for half a year, transferred into Brandeis while she was away on her year abroad.
Okay. Do you knew each other before that? No,
No.
This was okay.
No, I
So you
went
transferred in.
I got involved in the college radio station. That's my profession. I work in radio.
Although I have to say, we discovered earlier, like later on, that we had both been in Washington, D.C. at the same time at a rally for Soviet Jewry. But we didn't meet. There were thousands of people there and we didn't meet.
And we had some mutual friends from Jewish youth groups that we both knew.
So it was coming together before that, but didn't come together till you transferred.
Yeah, and I knew going to Brandeis, I said I'd like to actually have a relationship that I couldn't have had in high school where I was 2 years younger than anybody. I came back, I got into a little fling with somebody who wasn't all that interested in me, as it turns out, and broke up over the summer, came back in the fall, and was news director of the radio station, and she came back from France and got re-involved in the radio station very quickly.
So you were involved in a radio station before
Yes.
Scott was?
I started my sophomore year of college.
Okay.
I actually was involved with our campus newspaper and was getting frustrated with the politics. And my dad said, why don't you try the radio station? I had friends there.
Okay.
And I liked it. I didn't get along with the news director at the time, but I was enjoying news. And then I came back and was DJing. And it's funny because his ex-girlfriend was also involved in the radio station.
So you
She
knew
was an
her
executive.
also?
Well, I had just met her because she had started at Brandeis while I was gone. She was a sophomore.
Okay.
And I said, I want to get involved in news. And she said, oh, we have this great new news director, and he has the best phone number. And it was he. So, yeah, so his ex-girlfriend actually introduced us.
Nice. And what was the first introduction? What do you both remember about that?
She left a an answering machine message.
Yes.
This was 1990. She left an answering machine message, and I had known her name. She was known around the station as Lisa Stein with the news at 9.
Okay.
Was her-
So you had a
was her
tag.
Accidental
Okay.
tagline.
That was her accidental tagline. So I'd kind of known who she was, and I'd known that she was coming back, and we hit it off very quickly. We discovered that we had a whole bunch of common interests in music and radio and So we hit it off very quickly. What I did not know at the time was that she was still seeing somebody.
Yeah. Okay. So you started off talking. You had broken up with and become the ex with the person who was still part of the station.
If it was ever really something anyway.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But you were dating someone,
But we got
but
to be
had
good
heard
friends.
about
We
Scott.
got to be good friends really fast. Well, somebody I was dating wasn't involved in Brandeis at all.
Okay.
He was somebody I'd met independently, and he was
In France or home?
no
or?
in Boston.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
He
not
lived in
part of.
Boston. But he wasn't part of
Brandeis.
Brandeis. He
Okay.
was, yeah, and we had been dating before I left, and we had kind of an open relationship while I was gone, and then came back, and I discovered very fast that we couldn't pick up where we left off because he was getting very obsessed with the age difference. He had just had his 5-year college reunion and felt himself not talking about having a girlfriend because, oh my God, my girlfriend is still in college.
Okay.
And to what I wanted to say, I'm a senior, I'm 21.
Yeah.
You know, I've just spent a year by myself. And also I felt, if you've ever done a year abroad like that or a year anyplace like that, that is your growing up year. You will grow up in that year. And he just did not seem to be acknowledging that.
Okay. But
So-
you were grown up and you were growing up
Oh, yeah.
significantly.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so there was a lot of awkwardness. I mean, we were still seeing each other, but it just kind of felt like it was in a holding pattern. And Scott and I got to be good friends, and we were talking, and pretty soon I was talking to my parents saying, I don't know, there's this guy, and I know we're friends. I think we might have something more. What should I do about
Okay.
it? And
All right. And they were your confidants that you would talk about and didn't like because he wasn't Jewish and involved too. Your mother?
it was one of my parents who didn't like him because he wasn't Jewish, but I started realizing that might be a conflict later on.
Okay.
And there were other different interests too. Yeah.
If you do the math here, you'll realize that he was 27.
Uh-huh.
She was 21. Because I graduated high school early, I was 18.
Oh, yeah.
And
okay.
she didn't know that at the time. All she knew
Right.
was that at this point I was a junior, and she figured I was probably 20.
Right, because you were a transfer
Right.
student. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, when I first met him, he looked like a senior, so I thought he was 21 and
I
a
had-
senior.
I had long hair, I had a beard.
Yeah, it wasn't long anymore.
Had I cut it at that
He
point?
cut it.
Okay,
It was
Okay.
longer than now.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It
so I
was
just
hair.
assumed he was
Hair.
21 and a senior, and then he said he was a junior. I was like, okay, he's 20. That's fine.
Okay. But age wasn't a factor you talked about in there. You just assumed that, yeah, you're similar and you're in the same interest, same age group.
Well,
Okay.
he told me I was really he told me before we started going out, and I was very surprised. But he was also pretty mature. And so
Okay.
I was like, and I guess at that point I was thinking, well, we're at the same position in life, and how much is 3 years going to matter?
Okay.
But my parents teased me. They said we didn't send you to college to do remedial math because if you do the math, he was 2/3 of my previous boyfriend's age.
Oh, yeah.
So,
All right. Yep.
and then I guess we just sort of fell into romance, and I figured when something felt like a conflict, I'd do something about it. It took only a week for it to feel like a conflict.
Okay. And what did you do about it when it felt
I
like
was-
a conflict?
Broke up with the other guy.
Okay.
I was in the elevator headed up to her. We were in adjacent dorm buildings, and you were on what, the 5th floor?
Uh-huh.
And I was in the elevator, I think, headed up to see her as she was in the midst of
Breaking up with him.
Breaking up.
Yeah.
Okay. So it felt important after a week of you officially decided you were dating, or what changed from friend to dating?
We
for
kind of
both you?
started acting romantic.
Okay. All right.
We just, I don't know, we started being a little more romantic with each other, and nobody exactly said we were a couple, but if they see you, in any school situation, if they see you, you just become a couple.
Okay. All right.
People just kind
So
of.
you knew, and
put it
other
together.
people knew you had become a couple and shifted from friends to couple, and then after a week of feeling like that, you were on your way to the elevator and you
this
were
all
breaking
happened
up.
within like 5 weeks.
Okay.
This was very quick because we got back to school. It was the end of August.
Uh-huh.
And I think we count October 1st as being our official sort of couple-versary.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. And what makes October 1st as the?
I think the first time we kissed.
Oh, okay. Nice. Okay. All right. And so you broke up. You got out of the elevator, and what happened from there?
Actually, he didn't get out of the elevator. He called to say he was coming up, and I said, don't come up now. I'll come over in a little while.
Okay.
And I said goodbye to this other guy, sent him home, then I went over to see him, and then I told him about it. I said, I was seeing this other guy, and I decided it's like I don't want to see him anymore because I want to see you.
Okay. And that went well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was going on at first.
Okay.
Well, you said you were glad I could tell you that,
Well, yeah.
but
Okay. All right. And then where did it go from there? How did it progress?
So it all happened pretty quickly. We started dating beginning of October. We made plans for her to come to Rochester for Thanksgiving. And then that got upended by my grandfather dying about a week and a half before Thanksgiving. And so she came in early. I think you weren't here quite for the funeral, but you
I
were
came in
here.
Tuesday.
Yeah, so you came in time. So this was the worst possible introduction that
To
you
the
could
family.
possibly have to a family. Is the patriarch of the family has just died. And all of a sudden, hey, here's my new girlfriend.
Did that bring you closer together, or was
yeah.
that just awkward and stayed awkward?
A little of each.
Okay.
It wasn't awkward for us.
Okay.
It was awkward for the family. Scott was understandably feeling a little bit clingy, and his family didn't exactly like us being super physical in front of them, which I
Right.
get.
But you were being a
'cause
support to him.
Yeah.
Through
And now that I have a
grandfather
teenage daughter, I get that
I completely, yeah.
much
There's-
more completely.
There was
Yeah.
stuff that we argued about that we thought his family was being unfair. We didn't argue. We thought his family was being unfair, and looking back, I was like, I was kind of a jerk.
All right.
So,
All right. All right. You were kind of a jerk?
both of us.
Yeah.
You okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a jerk in terms of being defiant. Like, how can they tell us, like, we can't sleep in the same room? For instance, why are they arguing that we can't sleep in the same room?
Okay.
Scott had a younger sister who was still in high school, and I wasn't even thinking about that. We actually had this situation with our daughter last year. Had a boyfriend when she was working at camp, and they'd come home at the same time. And at one point, she wanted to spend the night at his house, and we said no. It's not that we thought that was going to keep them apart or keep them from doing anything they might do. I told her it's strictly optics because you've got a 13-year-old brother, and this might feel awkward for him. Yeah.
Yep. So you understand more
We
having
get
gone
those-
through it now.
Yes.
We get those pieces now, but then when we were back at college, more often or not than not, one of us was at the other's dorm room, and then was it the summer of
91.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so by the summer of 91, when we were off from Brandeis, we ended up both sharing an apartment with one of her friends from college also.
So
And
you
then-
basically moved in together, but were sharing.
Yeah, and then even though I
dorms.
had the dorm room senior year, I was over at her apartment as often, if not more so. And then by that point, she had graduated. And she was working, and so we had it was slightly awkward that one year where I'm still in college and she's not, and
Okay.
we had
How did you make that work?
I was over at her apartment a lot. My suite mates weren't super happy about me never being there.
Actually, we started to discuss it, and even though I missed him, we agreed that he should spend weeknights over at his suite.
Okay.
Most nights he did.
And my parents, in retrospect, looked back at the cost of it and said, well, if we'd known, we would have just had you rent with her and not bother paying for a dorm room, because it was not cheap, and I wasn't using my meal plan very much. But then, it was
Yeah.
pretty clear by the end of that I was staying in Boston, that we were living together, and that this was something pretty permanent. And so we got an apartment together by ourselves. And
Okay.
When the year after the lease was up in a year. In the meantime, my roommate also got a boyfriend, and he was over all the day. He also had a dorm, but he was over even more than Scott. He was a friend of ours, so it wasn't. I mean, we were all friends. But when the lease was up, the two of them got an apartment, and the two of us got an apartment.
Okay.
And they got married 2 years before we did. They're still together, so
Nice.
it
So
worked out.
so it was a transition year where you spent more time together and basically practiced living together and
right.
doing that as you then chose and started to live together.
it's weird because neither of us has ever lived by ourselves, really.
Oh,
Right.
okay. Yeah.
Which I think now, whenever everybody's away, I think I enjoy being alone, except for the dog and doing nothing.
Because that's the first time you've been able to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first time, gosh, I think it's when our daughter was at camp and Scott and our son were on a road trip. Or actually, before that, our daughter was at camp and Scott was on a trip, and our son was at day camp and spent the night at his grandparents. And I actually got 24 hours to myself,
Wow.
where it had
Okay.
been where I was alone, and I think I hadn't had that in 7 years.
Wow.
It was pretty cool.
And
It's
at
funny.
the time, did you think about that, or did you just feel like we're just supposed to spend
It
more
just
time
kinda
together?
happened.
Well, we didn't think about alone time. I will tell you, Scott did ask me to, end of the first semester senior year, he asked if I would live with him after we graduated. But then I had another friend who also wanted, we had been talking about getting an apartment together, and I was debating it and was on the fence, and then I remember asking my parents again, and they said, well, yeah, if you wanted to live with him, you could, but you're never going to have another opportunity to have an apartment with a single female friend.
Okay.
Which, I don't know if they had visions of Mary Tyler Moore or something where we're hanging out or going out together, because we did that a little bit, but most of the time we were with our boyfriends, so it kind of, or at home, it's not like, I mean, we're still good friends too, but it's not like we had any happy single woman life, like it wasn't like a sitcom.
Okay.
So I don't regret doing that, but it didn't give me any particular ideal anything.
Okay.
A lot of my friends from college were a year or two younger, and so they were still at college when I graduated, so there wasn't really an opportunity to say to them, hey, you want to live together somewhere. And I had gotten a very good job in radio basically right out of college, so it was clear that I was going to be staying in Boston for a while.
Okay.
And so it felt like the natural thing to do. And I regret at this point, not so much that, I regret kind of never having lived in New York City at all.
Yeah. Because that was a dream or something?
That was just something in retrospect. You know, I like New York City. I have family roots there. You know, I'll get to do it vicariously now. Our daughter's going to college there this fall.
Nice.
So
Nice.
we'll get a little vicarious New York through her now to the extent that she lets us.
Yep, that's how we do it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, just everything felt like it just, you know, at the time it just felt like it sort of fell into place. And so we had basically like 2.5 years of just being pretty stable, learning to do this together in an apartment. I had a very stable job. She was working her way through a couple of different jobs at the time.
I was trying to establish, I was doing a combination of temp work and freelance work that together made up an income. And then there came a point where I was able to do all freelance work.
Right. And during those 2.5 years, was it independent incomes doing your own thing, or were you sharing everything and coming together?
We combined, I mean, we each had our own separate bank accounts. But I look back on it now, and the expenses were we were paying in the suburbs of Boston, we were paying $680 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
You know, it would now be well into 4 figures, and probably would start with a 2.
But you were sharing and communicating about that stuff together, or were you independently doing your own thing?
Oh no, we shared the expenses. We talked about them. We shopped together, and
we had some practice with that year that she was sharing the apartment. You know, we had to figure that out kind of from the get-go, and I was chipping in towards stuff too, because I was more or less living there for chunks of it, so I would chip in towards it. So yeah, I mean, that's, you know, out of all of the things that I see as I talk to friends, and I look at other couples, and I look at family members, I think I see other people struggling more with combining finances than we ever did.
Because there was an open and clear communication between the two of you, whereas other people, money is a taboo that they don't necessarily talk about. And
it helped at the time. And I look back on it in retrospect, you know, because everything was so relatively cheap, we didn't have kids, the rent was low, I had bought a cheap used car, so I was making car payments, we didn't really have college debt to speak of, either of us, so we got lucky that way. You know, we were kind of charmed and didn't know it at the time, I think.
With me, I could go to Indiana University in Bloomington, and that was about it. And Bloomington was an hour south of Indianapolis. It was in the middle of nowhere. Purdue, it was the place to go if you were into more like math and engineering. And that was in a small town, again, an hour from Indianapolis.
But Boston seemed like a mecca of like...
Well, I was just desperate to get out of the Midwest, and I really, really liked Boston. And Boston was a mecca of colleges. But,
I had applied to Brandeis originally before I went off to Deep Springs.
Yeah.
I kept it in the back of my mind. But yeah, so we ended up after a few years of this, I proposed to her in '94.
On our date anniversary.
So tell me about that. What changed, or what was different in your intimacy that you were like, this is the time to do this? And
it had, you know, it's funny because it kind of felt like it was coming for a while. You know, we had We had gotten to know each other's families very well. We traveled back and forth. I'd been to Indiana visiting her family. Her mother has a ton of cousins. Her mother has a ton of brothers and sisters. She has a ton of cousins. And so there were all these big family weddings where, just kind of get dropped in and have to know who 35 different people are.
Nice.
Although you only went to one of them because we were the third.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
He wasn't. The first one happened when we were dating, but he didn't get invited. And the second one happened when we had been living together for a year, so he was invited, obviously. But then, were you at any? I guess you weren't there weren't any bar bat mitzvahs, but that wedding, and you'd seen them for other events.
Yeah.
We had a cousin who was going to school in Boston, so family members would come up and take us out to dinner or whatever.
Okay.
So
had natural family functions and things like that.
We felt
comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yes.
families, and you guys got
Family-wise.
accepted and together.
And we were comfortable being together. And so it wasn't as much a question of if as much as it just was, kind of the logistics of when.
Okay. Okay. Was there a point that shifted between when visiting your family where it was okay to be sleeping in the same room and getting over those conflicts?
with my family, it was after the first visit. My sister was in college, so
Okay.
we weren't any impressionable. I think the first time was we came back for Passover, and I said, "Is this still going to be a problem?" They said, "No, you have to double up," because my sister was bringing a boyfriend, which they were putting him in the guest room, and she had to sleep in her room.
Okay.
And then so she was the one who was annoyed by that.
So that it became a moot point.
Yeah.
Once it was clear that we were living together.
Then it was okay.
So,
Okay. Okay.
Well, there were still some issues with your family for a bit.
Yeah, but it cleared up. And then she had one aunt and uncle who were
Great aunt and uncle.
who were very assertive about, well, if you ever come to visit us until you're married.
I think
Okay.
they wouldn't house us till I heard. Oh, it was so crazy. It was my grandmother's older brother, and he had an 80th birthday party, which we didn't go to, but my grandmother and my aunt did.
Mm.
And they came back. You weren't there. I was visiting home a little bit, and I think you were still in Boston, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we went out to dinner with them. They were talking about all of the stupid things going on at the party. Because even though this was my grandmother's brother, she had kind of a rivalry with him. And so my aunt started talking about, they were saying, I don't know what's the matter with Lisa's upbringing, that they refused to get married. And she said, I don't think it's refusing, I think it's a question of timing. And they're just like, no, they're living in sin.
And keep in mind, I was still, 22, 23 at this
Right.
point.
Yeah.
Part of the reason we waited was just age and time.
Okay.
It's funny when you talked about what was the report where it's right. One of the things I really liked is the previous guy I was seeing when I'd mentioned living together after I graduated, he'd say, I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of commitment. Before I knew it wasn't going to work. I mean, before I went abroad. And I'd say, I'd say to him, if we're still together in 6 years or whatever, and he'd say, well, if we're still together in 6 years, I'd hope we'd be married. And I was like, okay, good, this is the right kind of guy.
Nice. Nice. All right.
Yeah, but so one of the reasons was age and just making sure we felt mature enough. And the other reason is sort of shallow, but I was waiting for my rabbi to retire. Because I didn't like him. I really didn't like the way he handled my bat mitzvah.
Okay.
And I remember the day I graduated from college, my dad, who was on the temple board, told me his contract was going to be up in 1994. And I said, okay, I can't get married for 3 years. Even though we hadn't been talking about getting married at that point.
And any new rabbi would have been better than that
Absolutely.
rabbi.
Turns out the new rabbi was really great because he'd been my youth group advisor, so I knew him ahead of time. It turned out he'd actually almost been the associate rabbi at Scott's Temple.
Okay.
So
nice.
he knew Rochester too.
Yep, nice. So tell me about the proposal. How was that?
So we were and still are big music fans, and there was this phenomenal folk music scene in Boston at the time that we were very deep into.
What's funny is that it was my ex got me into the folk scene, but then we made it our own.
Yeah. So there's this group of performers led by a woman named Christine Lavin, who's actually from around here. She's from Geneva.
Mm-hmm.
And they were called the Four Bitchin' Babes, and they were doing a concert at one of the theaters at Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
And I reached out to them. These days you just tweet at them or something, and I think I had to send them a letter or call their agent or something. And said, hey, can I arrange to do a proposal? And so they would do this thing at the concerts where people would drop requests on little slips of paper into a bag on the stage at intermission. And I had prearranged with them that they would pick one that I would have given them ahead of time. And so they get to this part, like we're sitting up in the balcony, as I recall, and they get to it and they reach into it and pull it out, and it's Lisa. Scott wants to know if after
4 wonderful
years together, if you'll marry him.
Yeah.
If you make it official.
If you make it a lifetime in American, which I thought was really sweet. And everybody started cheering.
And I had a diamond that I had inherited from a relative that wasn't set or anything at that point yet. I wanted her to be able to pick out a setting, but I had that with me. And,
so he gave me the diamond.
Nice. And did you know it was coming?
I suspected it was coming because he was dropping a lot of hints.
Okay.
And there were a lot of times he was sending emails that he said, don't look. It turns out those were the emails he was sending to Christine, the musician, about.
I guess we did. Yeah, I guess she did have emails with 1990.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was
this
email.
was very early for email.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
So what happened from there? Where did it progress from there? After.
I said yes. He gave me the diamond. We went up to them afterward. The musicians afterwards, they all hugged us.
Nice.
And then I went home and we started calling everybody we knew who we thought was awake.
There was no Twitter or Facebook yet. So.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Barely a web. And it was October 1994, and I knew just the way my family worked, and also I knew we were going to get married in Fort Wayne because my parents had said so because they were paying for the wedding.
Okay.
And I knew just the way we worked that there was no way we could have less than a year engagement and be ready. So then Scott suggested spring of 1996. I was like, okay, that's good. A year and a half, plenty of time to be ready, good weather. And then my dad suggested Memorial Day weekend because, well, in the Jewish tradition, you cannot get married on Shabbat. So if you're getting married on a Saturday, it has to be after sundown. And my 2 cousins before me got married on a Saturday, and the weddings were at 8:30 p.m. Followed by, because their mom was very into elegance, a long cocktail hour, a long dinner. I think we ate around like 11 p.m. Or something like that. There was a lot of food.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but holding off the family to eat is
What's that?
Holding off the family to eat after that is part of the process that.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
So, I mean, the cocktail hour was long, but there was tons of food, so we didn't starve. But then there was a sit-down meal after that, and then there was cake and dancing, and it was I think we left about 2 a.m. or something.
Right.
And we didn't want to have that late at night, so my dad said if you get married on the Sunday of a holiday weekend, it'll feel like a Saturday. And then he also pointed out that then we'd have kind of a built-in 3-day weekend for our anniversary a lot of times. So we got married the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend.
Nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Great. All right. And that engagement year and a half, was there anything significant that came out of that, or did you feel like you were coming closer together, or were you already there?
There
close
was one interesting bombshell that dropped in the midst of
Yes.
it.
Okay.
One very interesting bombshell.
It was 4 months before the wedding, so we were in the home stretch. My parents separated. And I got very freaked out.
About the institution of marriage and family and everything at that point? Yeah, okay.
It's funny because my cousin who was closest to my age had just gotten engaged, and I told her that. She was the one person who understood, I can't believe that, about my being freaked out about getting married now.
Okay.
I didn't want to not marry him, but I started thinking, oh boy, what if I was just freaked out by the idea.
Okay. So how did you navigate that, and how did you navigate that together?
We were so far, into the planning at that point that there was, even if there had been any desire to put the brakes on it, which there wasn't, I think on either part, it was just plow ahead. We were traveling back and forth to Fort Wayne and meeting with caterers and photographers and cake people.
We still knew we wanted to get married. I mean, I didn't have any. I didn't have any reservations about him. Just about. I thought my parents were happy, and now they're separating. And
so it made you question happiness and what was there with your parents and family, and can you really see what happiness is?
Yes.
Because you felt happy and you felt good together and still wanted to pursue, but you were freaked out going, can this happen?
What if I'm happy now and then I'm gonna be happy and think I'm happy and then suddenly whammo?
Yeah.
And there were, as similar as our families were, one big difference was that there was a long history of divorce in hers, whereas there really had been almost none in mine. And so I had a lot of models of couples who had just stuck it out together over years and years and years, and one of her sets of grandparents had been divorced, and her aunt, and eventually her sister. And
so you weren't
my
freaked
aunt
out
had been
when that
divorced
happened.
twice by then. My dad's sister had been divorced twice by then. My grandparents had been divorced. Cousins on that side of the family. My mom's family had stayed together. They had stayed married.
Mm-hmm.
So aunts and uncles were, but they weren't in the same city, so I couldn't see them day to day. And then my other grandmother's husband, my other grandfather died when I was a baby, so she was a widow. I didn't get to see that modeled. And she had died by the time Scott and I got together too. So,
but you had enough models, or at least a belief in your relationship, that this was like, no, we're into this. We're already committed. We're going forward. I can be happy.
And in a lot of ways, it was formalizing what already was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we were already living together. You know, yeah, we got the sets of china and the whatnot, and ended up within less than a year after we got married, we moved back to Rochester and started a whole new chapter.
Okay.
Because I got a job offer back here. And
okay. So did it feel different after the wedding, all too, or did it feel like you just were adding on to more of?
I felt like it was perceived as different.
Okay.
People seemed to be treating me a little bit differently. And some ways I felt a little bit older, I guess, just because I was married. Like, our relationship itself was kind of more or less the same, but the perception from everybody else was different, so I guess that made me feel different.
Okay.
I look back on it, and I mean, it feels, I can't put a huge distinction between who we were in, 92 or 93 and who we were in 96. In some ways, almost the bigger change was coming back here and then eventually buying a house and starting a family.
And that was a year later from a job offer, and you were enjoying Boston but wanted to come here, or what was the decision together on that?
We could see some things coming. We could see that the cost of living was going up. We knew at some point we were going to want to start a family. We weren't, she was 27, I was 24. We didn't feel it.
And you were discussing those things at the time.
Yeah.
Well, we knew even before we got engaged that we wanted kids.
Okay.
We had
so that was one of the make or break it things. You were like, yes, we both want this.
Oh, we found that out really early on. That we both wanted kids.
Yeah, and we knew that it was going to be a lot easier to raise kids somewhere other than an apartment in the suburbs of Boston. So there was a job offer in Pittsburgh that I considered, and then there was one that came up here. And at the time, my grandmother was well into her 80s, and I wanted to be around for her.
Here in Rochester.
And this offer came along, and it just felt like a natural move. At the time, I thought I'd be back here for 5 years maybe, and then we go somewhere else.
Okay. Yep. Well, it's
been
longer than 5 years. Yeah.
It's been 25 years we've been in Rochester now.
Oh, okay. So once you got to Rochester, what was your relationship like? What was the transition and what was different? Job was different.
There's a little bit of tension because it was his city.
Okay.
But it wasn't my city, and I didn't have a job. I'd been freelancing, but it was all. This was before you could do as much online and remote stuff, so I kind of had to leave all of the jobs I had behind. There wasn't anything I could bring with me, so I was starting from scratch trying to find.
And what kind of jobs?
Writing and editing.
Okay.
And I discovered there were actually temp agencies that just did professional placement. Like, I could just get editing and proofreading jobs through them. It was great.
Okay. So you could find things in Rochester here, but you didn't have family or community.
No, I could find them in Boston. One of those agencies was in Boston, but they didn't have them here.
Oh, they didn't have
I
them
looked.
here. Okay.
There was no professional placement. So I was doing office temp work again, and then slowly finding stuff on my own. And the other crisis was the Times Union folded, right after we moved.
Oh.
So suddenly there was, there were a ton of people going for the same jobs I was.
Okay.
There were overqualified people going for entry-level jobs just because they were afraid of job insecurity. Same thing.
Okay.
Also, didn't Kodak go through its first crazy amount of layoffs then in Xerox? Yeah, it was a bad time economically.
Okay.
And it was by the beginning of 1998, I was finally starting to put together some freelance work, but then there were a couple of full-time jobs I applied for, and I got interviewed. There were two where I got all the way through the round of interviews, and then one offered and one didn't.
Okay. But this was a conscious discussion during this time, or you didn't know how difficult it would be transitioning, or you were like, we know it's going to be difficult, this is how we can make it work?
I thought work-wise it would be a little easier for me to find stuff. We came in then because then the Times Union folded, and
it was driven almost entirely by my job. I'd been frustrated with a lack of advancement in Boston, and I just knew it was time to make a jump to somewhere, and I didn't know exactly what. I went into TV news, which turned out to be, I mean, you can see this is not a face for television broadcasting, particularly even back then. And so, we got back here, and I wasn't necessarily enjoying what I was doing all the time either.
Okay. So how did you work that out together?
Well, what I'd said to him is, I don't have a full-time job here. I'm doing freelance. I'm sure I'll be able to find freelance work in Rochester.
Okay, so you had confidence.
Yeah. I wasn't sure what the scene actually was. I just figured somebody's got it.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually they did. It just took longer to find.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I think I was making enough to pretty much cover most everything.
Okay, so you felt some security together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we were never, at this point, again, before having kids and everything, we were living in a relatively inexpensive apartment. And,
mm-hmm.
I mean,
and your relationship was feeling solid, and that wasn't
we were
questioning that because you both still wanted the same thing.
We were doing a lot of travel.
Okay.
That was another little source of tension. He had a really good friend who was another radio geek who was monopolizing a lot of his time.
Okay.
And I was just saying, yeah, fine, go ahead, and then discovered I was finding myself a little bit lonelier because I hadn't
because
met
you didn't
a lot
have
of people
a
yet.
System and a support system here, and and feeling good about a job.
It's funny because I had discovered some online groups. I was spending a lot of time online, probably more than I should have. And then I actually started a weird project where I was trying to find a new person for my mom.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
I was actually, there were some Jewish dating sites that I signed up with a profile, and I told everybody, I'm not looking for me, I'm married. I was hoping I'd find some friends in the bargain, but I started looking for my mom.
Okay. But you signed up for you and looking for your mom to find
I filled
people,
out a
or you signed up your
for
mom?
Me,
Okay.
and then put in the profile that I was looking for friends.
Uh-huh.
And then when I would chat with people, they'd say, why are you here if you're married? And I said, okay, don't laugh. But I'm trying to find someone for my mom. Most people would say, oh, what a sweet daughter you are.
Okay.
Some people thought it was weird or thought I was making it up.
And 99% of the time, I didn't really feel threatened by that. We were confident enough in our marriage that, I knew that she wasn't running off and cheating on me. And, we still have some friends who she made at the time who've become good friends
Okay.
For both of us.
So did you find it weird, or did you find it endearing, like some of the people responded to?
There were some moments where it was like, hey, you're spending an awful lot of time online. I think I didn't realize at the time the frustration level that she had, with me going off for a weekend and chasing radio stations somewhere, or hanging out with friends that she didn't have yet.
Absolutely. And I think I was finally said, I need to be able to say no, this weekend isn't good even if we aren't doing something. It's funny because there were a couple of friends, they were never more than friends, but I was getting too dependent on them and a little bit clingy. And one of them came to, he came to visit us. And I think we were a little bit more bonded than Scott and I at that point. But he lives in Toronto, and then Scott went up a couple of times. I went to Toronto by himself, and they get together for lunch. The two of them became good friends independently. And it's funny. What's neat is now he's married, and now he has a kid, and we're all friends. It's one of those special situations where our kids are friends too.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And it's funny because when we first got to be friends with him, that was actually what I wished for. I said, I hope you find somebody, and then we're friends with your wife, and then our kids are friends. And it worked out, yes.
All right. So you were starting to predict for others like your mother did for you.
I guess so.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So that's how you negotiated through that, was kind of sitting through those feelings and communicating about it and going, this is what I'm supportive of, this is what I'm not? Or how did you work through that?
A couple of things happened. She ended up getting a couple of much better jobs that were keeping her much busier.
And feeling better about purpose and what you were here.
And I was slowly starting to meet a few people. I mean, with the one friend with the couple of friends I'd been to dependent on, I mean, I said, I think I'm getting too dependent because I don't have that from you or whatever.
If we'd known about
But you were talking about that.
If we'd known about stand-up comedy back then,
then you would have found people there.
Maybe we did discuss it, as if that's your question. We solved it by talking about it.
Okay.
And then I tried to give him the opportunity to get to know this one friend. As I said, they started getting together when I wasn't around. And
which helped bring in Scott as part of the relationship and shifted the dependency, the more dependent kind of stuff.
And she got to know some of my friends better, and
that you were traveling with or seeing as well too. So so you brought people more into your relationship as opposed to separating them out.
Well, and she got to know some of my work friends too. Like one of the people who's turned out to be one of my dearest friends in the world worked with me at the TV station, and we all started hanging out a lot together. And
yeah, that's another one. He was single at the time, but I met him because he was coming out to cover stories where I was working. Okay, I started working as the PR person at Genesee Country Village.
Oh,
and that is, I think, when things finally opened up for me and I felt settled, because there was a whole community there of people that I was working with. And so I had a lot of work friends. And then there's one guy who was working at the art gallery there who became a really good friend of mine, and we're still friends now.
Okay.
He wound up leaving about the same time I did. He's a college professor now.
Okay.
But so suddenly I had the community at work, and then because it was Genesee Country Village, they were involved with like other cultural and touristic attractions in the city, so I got to meet people from there.
Okay.
And so suddenly I did have a group of stuff.
Okay. So each of you having your own interests in your own communities of people built up and felt better by being able to communicate about that and bring each other into those worlds.
we started,
move
I mean,
forward?
those worlds began overlapping a lot better because we had gone from knowing all the same people at college.
Yeah.
And most of them had still stayed in Boston as we did, and so it was a very tight knit group of people that we were all just kind of hanging out together with. And then we both kind of, because most of the people I had gone to high school with had left, so I came back here, and it wasn't like I had a lot of people to hang out with either initially.
But your radio friends were enough, I mean, maybe they weren't enough for you, but they were enough for you to have something to do, I should say.
Well, and we also, we both got very busy with work.
Right, very busy with work.
Okay.
And so that really kind of kept us occupied, and plus we had moved into a house, or moving into a house.
Okay.
We did that in 1999.
Okay. All right. Tell me about that and the
dog.
progression from there.
Oh, the
What
dog
happened
was a
from
little
there?
bit afterwards, but I think having the friends, as I said, work and getting busy, and then I got to know some of his colleagues at work because they'd come out to cover stories, and the one photographer who'd worked with him a lot became a good friend of both of ours, and he started becoming like my sort of stand-in. If Scott was going on a radio trip, then I would call and we'd go get dinner or a movie or something.
Okay. And that was comfortable for both of you because you were part of your circle.
She was one of my best friends and still is.
He also was somebody who sometimes would go out with both of us.
Yeah.
Okay.
In town. It wasn't just he'd go out with me when Scott wasn't around. It was the three of us would go out, and then Scott would go away, and I'd call him up and I'd say, "I'm bored. You want to do something?"
Okay.
And then he got a girlfriend, and then we wound up becoming a foursome, and then someone comes and Scott would go, and it was me with the two of them.
But I think we kind of knew, like, especially as she was approaching 30, I think we knew that there were some benchmarks that we wanted to hit. And so we knew when we came back here that we weren't going to stay in an apartment forever.
Right.
And so we started, after about a year in the apartment, we started house hunting. And there were some hiccups there. We found one that
2 years in the apartment when we finally moved, I think.
Yeah, but we started looking, we found a house that we'd really liked, and then that deal fell through, and there was some tension from that, and then fortunately we found another one that we fell in love with, and here we still are 22 years later, which was never the...
And that's the house
plan,
that you're...
Yeah.
Okay.
Almost, I guess it is 22. 23 in October.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, but you were both on the same goals, you just weren't... You were frustrated with not being able to achieve them and things out of your control that were increasing the tension as opposed to things that were in your control.
Yeah, but we knew we wanted the house. We knew once we were in the house that we were going to want to get a dog, and then start talking about having a family.
Okay. All right. What was that conversation?
We had known we knew we were both dog people from the beginning because I had a lot of friends who were cat people. And I didn't want to marry a cat person.
Okay, luckily, so that was make or break criteria also, a cat person.
Yeah. Not a make or break, but I didn't want to be with somebody who wouldn't let me get a dog.
Okay.
Well, luckily, we both had dogs growing up, so he was very happy to get a dog. And I really wanted one, but he said, not while we were in an apartment, and I agreed even though I was lonely without a dog.
Okay.
So we got we got the house, and then I was turning 31, and he gave me a dog for my birthday, which was not but in the way you're supposed to do it. He didn't give me a box with a dog in it. He talked about he wanted to get me a dog, and we started discussing a short list of breeds.
Okay.
And we knew we wanted to rescue one, so we went to Lollipop Farm, and got very, very
And
lucky.
found one that fit one of your list of breeds and as well too. Okay.
She was
Nice.
great, yeah.
Yeah.
She was well, I had more groups that were like I didn't have specific breeds, but I had groups like I said, a retriever or a spaniel. Like
Mm-hmm.
I like stuff with the sporting group. He grew up with a toy poodle, and I didn't like poodles much, and I grew up with an Irish setter, and he grew up with a toy poodle, so I wanted a big dog, and he didn't. We decided we could compromise on a medium dog.
Okay.
And the one we found was a medium-sized dog. We found out later on she was actually a little bit small for her breed size, but she was very friendly.
So that fit better for smaller dog kind of too.
Well, she was a medium. Her breed is they're medium dogs with big dog attitudes.
And I've come around. I'm not a small dog person anymore anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've compromised
It was
on
a
working
good
together on
compromise.
what
It
you were
worked out
doing
well.
as well too. Right. So
Right.
tell me about the conversation. You said dogs is a milestone, kids is a milestone. Tell me about that conversation and moving forward with that.
Kids was a big milestone. There have been a couple other things that had happened along the way. I'd actually left the full-time TV job.
Okay.
She had gotten what seemed at the time to be a very good full-time job at the newspaper. And I had started discovering the joys of freelance work and consulting.
Okay.
And
So it
figured-
shifted some of the security stayed the same, but shifted the roles.
Mm-hmm.
It did. And I was still very busy just in other different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, I don't even remember us really discussing so much as it just kind of happened.
The kids, no, we discussed when we were going to start trying.
Yeah, but then it
I
just,
I think I was 32 or 33, and I started thinking now's the time to try to start because I didn't want to be
Okay.
too old. And I remember trying to decide if I felt ready, and somebody said, "Well, you're never ready. You're just,
Okay.
because they're unpredictable."
Right. So
But it was
ready,
like
you
we
were
had
ready
our
enough.
house,
You
he
both
was-
knew what you wanted. You had your house.
Mhm.
You had your dog. You were like, I guess this is the next thing that's happening.
we had the
Yes.
bedroom,
Yeah, we
Okay.
had our house, we had our dog, and we had steady jobs.
Okay. All right. So what progressed from there?
So we had our daughter in the fall of '03,
Hmm.
and she was a good baby.
Nice.
She was a great baby.
She was a very easy baby, and things were going very well for a while. And then she got sick.
What
Yeah.
happened?
I actually started getting sick when I was pregnant. Crohn's and colitis runs in my family. And then it seemed to get better, but then it would get worse again. And then it got really bad after my daughter was born, which I discovered is actually kind of a standard thing. And then it would stabilize a little, but never completely get better.
So how did that impact your relationship?
It caused a bunch of stressors. She ended up leaving her job.
When she was 10 months
When
old.
she was 10 months old. It was just a really inhospitable environment for a working mother, and
Mhm.
I was doing okay with the freelancing, and then picked up a part-time work at the radio station, where I've been ever since. And so financially we were doing okay, but it was just
We had to do a switch for health insurance because we were on my health plan.
yeah,
But,
there were some new levels of insecurity
Mhm.
as a result of this, and then just years upon years of not knowing really what her prognosis was going to be. We had our son in '08, by which point she was very, very sick.
We almost thought we couldn't have him. It's funny because there were a lot of times where our daughter was like at the toddler and preschool stage where I was napping a lot, and he'd get frustrated with how much I was sleeping. In retrospect, we didn't realize that I just had no energy because of being sick. Like having a toxic organ was draining everything.
And not being able to have it clearly diagnosed and clearly treated.
Oh no, it was
Just
clearly
consistent.
diagnosed. I
Okay,
just
but
wasn't
not-
responding to the drugs.
Okay.
Which eventually led to a series of surgeries
They tried just about every drug on me.
Wow.
that, for the first few years of our son's life were incredibly disruptive for him. And there was one point where we were visiting Indiana, and she ended up in the hospital out there for 2 months?
3 weeks
Wow.
there, 3 weeks here.
Yeah.
They finally transported me back by ambulance to Strong.
Wow.
So it was a 6-week hospital stint. He was at this point in kindergarten, I think.
Yeah.
But it was obviously interfering. We wanted to have a second child, and I was having trouble getting pregnant again. And they started thinking that the disease was interfering, and they told me I was going to need surgery, and I wasn't against it, but I wanted to wait till I'd had both kids, because I thought, what if it
Might keep you from
compromises
having.
fertility?
Okay.
Yeah. And then they said, you're so sick, that might be a part of the problem. You might want to look at surgery. And so I started looking at the options, and I don't know what happened. Then suddenly I was pregnant. So, but I knew at that point I was going to have the surgery, so I basically delayed it long enough till he was born, and a little bit older. I had it when he was 4 months old.
All right, and there wasn't good decisions because you didn't respond to the treatments well enough to know
Right.
what the right thing to do was.
Those were probably, I would say, the darkest points in there. 2014 especially was just kind of a hell year
13 and 14.
with surgeries, and I couldn't focus on doing my freelance work. So then there were money crunches on top of that, and just not knowing what was going to happen with her. And there were points during a few of the surgeries where I didn't know if we were going to lose her or not.
Wow, that's scary.
And here I was with a newborn baby and a 5-year-old.
Right, and trying to take care of her and
Wait, in
the
09?
kids. And
You thought I was that sick in 09 and 10?
Not 09, but later on.
When he was a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old, I think.
Yeah, a lot of those years are kind of blurs.
Yeah.
right, because they were hard to
As
sit
a
in.
result of all of that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that was just kind of raw survival. And
All right.
And they had said to me, you're not responding to any of the treatments. One of my gastroenterologists had said, I don't recommend surgery lightly, but you gotta have it. It was a 3-part surgery, which was harder. The second one had a long recovery period. The third I thought was going to be okay, and then I thought home free, but then I was still having symptoms.
Okay, so did you get to home free, or you just
No,
kind of
I am
have
now.
managed?
I think
Okay.
I'm home free now. Well, the 3 after it was supposed to be the 3-part surgery and be done, I was still getting sick. And they were trying to treat me with drugs, not working, and then they did a surgery and discovered that I had like a bunch of adhesions and scar tissue, and that I don't know if I was close to dying there, but it was a mess. Basically, they came out and said like my insides were a complete mess.
Wow.
And had corrected that, and then
So you were living with this fear and the tension constantly, for
and
that
just feeling
time.
awful all the time. The day after my birthday in 2013, I woke up feeling like I was having a heart attack.
Wow.
But I said, I'm sure it's not my heart. I'm sure it's my stomach. But I was having these pains like way up here. It turns out that I'd had like a perforated intestine or something and
So you
sepsis.
needed
And I wound up
surgery
going to the
again?
ambulance. Emergency surgery. And that's the one where they thought, Scott says thought they were going to lose me. That's a blur. They kept me in a medically induced coma, so I don't remember the worst of it.
Okay, but you just remember the pain beforehand. But,
I remember the pain beforehand, and they were trying to give me a central feeding line, and it was hurting when they were putting it in, so I said, I'm going to try to go to sleep so I don't have to feel it. And then I woke up 10 days later.
Wow. So that's a long time. And
Yeah.
you were just sitting through that tension, not knowing. And
her mother
and the
came
fear.
in for part of it, and that certainly helped. But it was just, I look back now, and it was just, the Sia song Chandelier. This was a hit at one of these points. It was on the radio constantly as I was going back and forth to the hospital. It was, just holding on for dear life, and just that was where I was at that point. There was no,
terrifying. Yeah.
there was no life at that point other than just trying to keep the kids in one piece. And
Yeah. So how did you come out of that?
I woke up, I was in ICU, and I wanted to be able to just move forward. Wanting to feel like a person again is what got me going forward, because I think they had kind of bound my hands because I was apparently trying to pull out my tubes or something, and I had some sort of breathing tube so I couldn't talk, so just being able to get to the point where I could talk and move again and get out of ICU, because ICU is just a complete hellscape. We were traveling to Fort Wayne because my grandmother was getting an honorary degree, and I started feeling sick on the way there. And then they discovered I had a blockage, and I went to the hospital, and they had to do emergency surgery, which then wasn't done exactly right, so they had to do a second emergency surgery, and that was the 6 weeks in 2014.
Wow. So this was how long of just struggling with this?
Oh my
This sounds
gosh.
like years and years.
it was like a
About
decade.
11, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, like 10 to 11 years.
Okay.
I think we came out of it as somewhat different people
How so?
than we were going in. I think that she's never fully recovered the level of energy that she
Mhm.
had, and
I
so
wish.
we still to this day, like, we've ended up, especially now as we've both gotten older, we've ended up on very different schedules. I go to bed a lot earlier most nights and get up a lot earlier
Mm-hmm.
most morning. I think it has kind of redoubled my efforts to try to lead a healthier lifestyle. I got diagnosed a couple of years ago with diabetes, and so I've been trying to exercise a lot more and
Mm-hmm.
keep my weight down and just be more energetic. And I think there's still, it almost feels like there's still sort of like a backlog of stuff in the house that has never gotten fully dealt with,
Mm-hmm.
ever since then.
All right. So health became in the forefront for those 10, 11 years, and then stayed as a priority to try to stay healthy and be healthy together.
That and being much more focused. The kids obviously became a much bigger part of our lives, and dealing with them and dealing with some developmental issues with our son and his schooling. And so there's been, there were a lot of years in there where it was less really focusing on us and more focusing on the kids and focusing on her health, and me dealing with work issues. And then right before the pandemic hit, then we kind of turned this other chapter of getting into our 50s and discovering this new fun thing to do together that's kind of brought a new spark into it.
Right.
Okay. So that was a little lighter, but another common interest, similar to radio, TV, news stuff. You had those common interests.
Which we didn't know was going to be a
well,
common
too.
interest. This was all her at the beginning.
Oh,
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I started this. Well, it's funny. We had another common interest that we were both doing, which was bar trivia, which we started to try to do more. And once the kids were older, I realized that I just needed to. That things had been so wrapped up with them, especially with our son, who just. I mean, I assume if you're just. I mean, I think he's scarred from my illness, even though he doesn't remember it. If you're a baby when your mom's not around and you have all that.
It's impact,
Yeah.
whether it's scar or not, but there's definitely impact.
Yeah, so he's been very needy for a lot, and even though he and I are close, there's times where I remember I said several times I like going places where the first thing people wouldn't call me is mom.
To have a different identity.
Right.
Yeah.
And Scott had some friends he started playing trivia with, and sometimes I could come, but sometimes I couldn't because it's a maximum 6 people. We'd sort of take turns, but then I started wanting to do it more, and he wasn't doing this to me, but I was feeling left out. I was actually, I think, some of the other team members doing it. Just there's a little bit of a clickiness that he didn't want to leave me out.
Right.
But I started thinking, you know what? Playing every other week or when he's out of town isn't enough. I want to do it more, so I formed my own team and my own places. So I had a tight group of friends.
And that gave you time and space to do something for you.
Absolutely.
Additionally.
The quizmaster of the group where I was playing became a good friend of mine, and he was very big into improv comedy.
Okay.
And he also he decided to put together a comedy showcase at the bar where he ran trivia, and he was in it, so I came to see him do it. And I found myself, and everybody was doing 420 jokes because it was on 420. It was also the second night of Passover, so I started thinking, Passover, 420. What happens when those
the
conflate?
combination of those, yeah.
Yeah, and I found myself putting together a routine in my head, and then I told my friend about it. He said, that's funny, you should do that. And then meanwhile, the bar where he worked started doing an open mic night. And by the time I had the confidence, I didn't want to do a month-old routine, but I wrote a new one. I did it. It went really well. The host was very supportive.
Nice.
Actually passed me a really sweet note saying how good a job I did, and he hoped I'd continue it. Scott was there watching me do it and being supportive.
Nice.
So, and as he could tell, I just had a total rush from this. So then I went to some more mics. He kept coming to them. And suddenly he had some jokes in his head. And I was like, and I said to him, that's the sign. If you start writing jokes in your head, you got to try it. That's the sign.
And that's what gave you the smiles and the energy, that since you didn't have the energy also, you started to have that and be able to do that also.
I know. I want to get back to the energy level and get back to where he is. I don't want to be sedentary. In fact, even though my last surgeries were in 2014, I've gone back into the hospital several times, and the last one was right before my 50th birthday.
Mm.
And when I got out, I remember just thinking, this was when I'd started playing trivia regularly and got to be good friends with the quizmaster, who was 20 years younger than I was. And so I think I started having some younger friends and trying to feed off their energy a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the people in my trivia group are younger, and you
you were able to get energy back after
Yes.
going to the hospital as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I mean, that
Okay.
sort of made me determined, like, I'm 50 isn't that old, and who knows if I'm going to get sick again, so I want to make sure I do stuff.
Okay. All right. So
And-
that's part of how each of you have changed, and it continues to impact.
Mhm.
It impacts the energy level and impacts the making sure you search for interests and things that you enjoy and can have energy and smile about, and
Right.
be able to do also coming out of those dark times.
Yes.
Yeah, her grandmother lived to be 102.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
2/3.
Yeah, and one of her secrets, that she always said, or that, at least that we picked up, was that she
She didn't say it, but I said it.
she was always making younger friends,
Okay.
and so she had people to do things with, who weren't constantly about to die or dying, or
yeah,
Slowing
whatever.
that's a
down.
good
and-
secret. Yeah.
and so it's fun being around all of these people who are now barely half my age.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
Some of them.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's weird sometimes too, because they're up later and doing stuff that I'm not necessarily interested in.
Mm-hmm.
There are different stages in their life, and I'm sure that they must look at me and think that I'm ancient. But
Mm-hmm. But you find a commonality and
and
to do that.
there's very little
Yes.
pressure to it. I know I'm not going to try to make a life's career out of it,
Mm-hmm. But you can enjoy it
But
together as a
but
thing
we
you
can
both
we
do.
can enjoy it together, and we're kind of feeling out where the little competitive bits are.
Mm-hmm.
We both signed up for Funniest Person in Rochester.
Uh-huh.
Which by the time this comes out, we'll know whether or not either of us or both of us have advanced, and,
Yeah.
and we both made a pact that we'll be supportive of each other regardless.
Right.
Nice. Well, it sounds like making pacts together to be supportive of each other has been times in crisis and in other times where you're like, we're still on the same page.
Yeah.
And doing that, that's maintain your relationship. So
That, and I think it's learning. I think we've learned a lot more, even just in the last couple of years, about what happens when we get tense and
Mm-hmm.
we fight with each other. I know some of that was just being cooped up together constantly during the pandemic.
Some of it's just being worn out dealing with kid stuff.
But I think
Or
we've
house
we've
stuff.
learned a little bit more about what triggers each of us and how to be able to back away from that when we need to back away from it. And I don't think,
Mhm.
there was a point where we didn't know that well, even after we've been together for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And we've learned now, sure, her style is to just keep talking and talking and talking and talking until everything is 154% resolved. And my style is, no, I just need to be left alone for a while and close the door. And we had to get to the point where she understood, no, it's not a good thing to keep following me upstairs, where I needed to understand, okay, sometimes she just needs to keep talking about it.
Mm-hmm. And you reach a point where you understand that about each other enough to go, oh, this is one of those times to be able to work through things.
And some of it is the house. Sometimes I need a break too, but they've got this weird instinct that tells me don't walk, you're a quitter if you walk away, which is really dumb because part of growth is learning how to, walk away from a bad situation.
Mm-hmm.
So some of it isn't just that I have to keep talking, it's giving myself permission to take a break too,
Nice.
which I don't do enough. And then the other thing that makes a big difference with him is there's a big difference between him just saying I can't talk to you and walking out and saying I need to take a break, you can talk to me in half an hour.
Nice.
Yeah,
that
there's
makes a
Set
big difference.
That there's a time frame on it.
Yeah.
And I think I've at least figured out too that, as frustrating as marriage can be after 26 years, sometimes that, the alternative still feels worse.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of trying to start something over again with somebody that I don't know as well, who doesn't know all of my quirks, and, just the huge common language that we share
Absolutely.
from 30 some years together, and especially now with all of this additional layer on it of doing comedy together.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't realize when we both started doing comedy that there weren't any other married comics.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know it was weird.
Yeah, because there's a aspect to relationships of having your own thing, but then sharing the things together, and you guys share things together really well. And I
Right.
think that's part of what you've gained after the 30 years also.
Yeah.
But I think too, and I mean, I'd be interested to know what you see watching us do this. See, I'm an interviewer too. I'm gonna get paid.
Yes.
You know, our styles comedically are very different.
Mm-hmm.
She rehearses things like crazy. I'll hear her in the shower,
Yes.
constantly, you know, honing every word of her act, and I tend to be a little bit looser and a little bit more improvisational, which probably comes from having to be that way on the radio
Yeah, that makes sense.
every day. And so I think we come at it in enough different ways. You know, we're not there's no point. There's almost no point, I think, even when we're stealing stuff from our own lives, where we've ever really been inclined to make the same thing into a joke.
Yeah, and
that I can think of.
Yeah, and it seems that my impressions, or it seems like because of your different styles enough, that you also, and this makes sense in the context of hearing about your 30 plus years of relationship, is you don't do a lot of conceding, but you do a lot of compromising. Like one of you doesn't, and tell me if I'm wrong in this, but neither one of you really gives up, no, I'm not going to do this thing or have this thing or have this experience, and just defer to you, because you both have common interests and you both have commonalities and common goals and milestones that you're like, as long as we're still on the same path, then we can compromise on those things. So if there's a topic that comes up that one of you thinks is funny, then you can be like, all right, yeah, sure, talk about that. It's not going to impact me.
Well, there was a big concession I made a long time ago, but I don't think it matters as much as we both tried to start working in radio, and I was really unhappy in the job I had, and I decided to leave it. But one of the reasons I left her is I didn't like the idea of us going for the same jobs or trying to compete. But the other thing is I knew that radio was one of my interests, but it wasn't. It was his burning interest growing up. He was just, radio was his thing, whereas I kind of like general news, general entertainment.
Okay.
I liked radio, but I also liked writing in newspapers. Like I wound up going back to print. So
And had enough passion for those
absolutely
as well. So you both maintained your passions throughout, but you conceded on the specific format of it.
Yeah, and I think another example of that is I'm in radio now too, but I don't do what he does. I'm not radio news. I have a show on a low power FM. I have my music show on a low power FM station. I'm trying to grow that.
Nice.
I don't know
Your
if I'm allowed
Beatles
to
one.
plug
Sure,
it.
yeah, absolutely plug it.
Yes, the Tragical History Tour on Rochester Free Radio.
Yeah.
Saturday nights, 5 to 7, and I also have an internet affiliate in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. But I've been doing that for 6 years. I've been trying to get more affiliates, but that's my thing. Even though I think he would do a perfectly competent job, that's
Right.
my interest.
Nice.
Way more than his.
If I ever did one, it would be a Springsteen show.
Okay,
Right.
it wouldn't be the Beatles, it'd be Springsteen. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Okay.
But we have fun. You know, we went to see when Ringo Starr and Paul McCartney were both in the area. We went to go see both of them.
Nice.
But it's interesting because we don't, you know, I know exactly what's going to be in her act when she gets up on stage because I've heard it 90 times coming out of the shower in the morning.
And a lot of times I say to him, I think I'm going to do this bit tonight.
Yeah. She, for the most part, doesn't necessarily know what I'm going to do when I step on stage, and I like to kind of surprise her a little bit
Nice.
and then get her feedback on it. But I think instinctively I also know where are the lines that are too far.
Because you know each other so well.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So what else would be important to share, or other things you've learned about relationships throughout these many years that you have run together?
Google Calendar has been a tremendous,
Oh, yes.
tremendous benefit. I don't know what we did without it.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you know, we used to just be very loose with, you know, like our summer planning, and now especially with the kids, it's like, okay, we gotta pretty much know what we're doing every weekend this summer and fit in all of the pieces. And without that, I don't know how we would ever do it.
Nice.
Um,
Okay.
You know, so that
So
has
having the
been
right tools to manage.
never mind Google Maps. Google Calendar is
Okay.
where it's at.
Yes. I'm just on Google Calendar.
That's-
Yeah.
Trying to think. Well, he's he's more of a planner and organizer than I am. When I do it, I'm good at it and I want to do it, but I have trouble starting to do it. I have no idea why. I think the biggest thing is because it's with him. He's just able to map stuff out in his head, and I can't.
Yeah.
I figured. I think if you compared our brains, his basically is like a mapping stuff. His brain would look like mapping software.
Okay.
My brain is, I finally figured out I have If You Give a Mouse a Cookie Brain. You know that book?
Yes.
Yeah, where you start, you give a mouse, and then it opens up this whole path. Like, part of, I don't clean as much as I want to, because I look at something and I'm like, okay, I need to vacuum. Well, if I vacuum, I have to dust first, because otherwise dust is going to get in the carpet. Well, then I have to pick up all this stuff and wipe it down, because I can't
And
just
if you have to
dust
wipe
and
everything
leave it.
down, you have to wipe down the stuff in the other room. And
Yes,
continue to go
exactly.
there. Okay.
So I think knowing I have If You Give a Mouse a Cookie Brain is
Okay.
sort of helping a little bit.
So knowing each other's brains and learning each other's brains, how
Yeah,
you
I
work.
think we've learned more about that. I like being in our 50s.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're very comfortable with each other.
Yes.
Nice.
In our 50s, there are probably some pieces of physical intimacy that could be better.
Mm-hmm. Because of being in your 50s, or because you
Aging,
know each other that much more and need to
aging,
adjust?
meds.
Okay.
Medical stuff.
Yeah.
But being aware of those allows you to communicate about it. And
Yeah,
be able
and we
to
can
try to
talk about it, and that's not something that we fight about
Okay.
very much, if ever. The fights, when they happen, are much more just about, here is this thing that's been on your to-do list for a month. Will you just get that done already?
Okay. But it sounds like you're comfortable with conflict and have ways
We're-
to
we're
be able to
getting
manage
We
there.
can discuss
Okay.
it.
We're
Okay.
getting there. It's
Okay.
it's
But you
getting
understand conflict gets you to a resolution. It's not just, oh no, we're going to conflict and then our lives are going to be a mess.
better. Yeah, we're not
Right.
we're not at the phase where we were, where we're stalking loudly out at each other and getting the neighbors worried, and
Mm-hmm.
and there had been those points, especially like during those dark years when she was sick, and I think we've
And when things were tense with our son.
yeah.
Just because when he was having a lot of emotional problems, that really affected us too.
Okay.
And now we're kind of trying to figure out, okay, here's this next chapter now that's coming, with the first child out of the house, and just a few years left with the next one, and who do we want to be, where do we want to be, what do we want to be doing after that?
Okay.
I think there is another point that that I'm thinking about a lot, which is, it's inevitable that we're going to be like our parents a little bit, but
Okay.
I'm trying to recognize when I'm being like my mom or my dad in a way that I don't like, and I'm trying to confront it.
Okay.
And I hope I'm doing that with you too. But one of the nice things, there's a couple of things that drive. In some ways, he's a lot like his dad. In some ways, he's not. Like, he wants to try new things and get out and do stuff, which is really great. And it's been that way forever, and it's definitely improved. So that's.
But being aware of that and knowing how you're like your parents and
I feel-
being able to
Right.
make decisions about that has helped you.
I
Yes.
feel like I'm trying to fight getting old much more than my father did,
Ah,
and he's
okay.
dealing with dementia now, which is a whole other thing, and
Yeah.
that's part of why I want to try to stay active and do what I can
And create those memories and
to avoid the pieces
experiences.
that aren't inevitable, whichever pieces those are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to see what control you have over it and be able to do
Yes.
that. Okay.
Exactly.
All right. So, anything else you'd like to summarize that you think other people would be helpful knowing about your experience, about advice you'd have for people and their relationships?
I think I've seen other couples that I feel like they don't communicate as openly as we try to about things, whether it's money or whether it's here's how I really feel about doing these particular things and what are priorities to me. And I think we've always tried to be open with each other about that, and I think that it's helped avoid some of the tension that I've seen in some of our friends sometimes over the years.
And go ahead.
Oh, I feel like there's a lot of people who are just like, I don't like this, so I won't do it, and they don't want to compromise. And one of the things I've discovered about myself, even before Scott, there's very little that I won't try once or something, even if it's not my favorite thing to do. And so people think I'm crazy for having gone to all of these different radio tower sites with him all over the years, but I always have something to read. I sit there, or I listen to music, and then I try to look up what else is there, and I'll say, well, can we also see this? It's not just, because everybody was like, you're always letting him do all of that, and what do you get to do? But it's like,
You get to do stuff.
yeah, I get to do stuff, and it's not like it's this horrible, I'm doing nothing. It's not like he's dragging me out and making me walk around and look at the sites. I get to sit there and read.
Well, it sounds like, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, is one of the things that I talk to people about is being able to take care of yourself and entertain yourself And entertaining yourself is one of the skills that we don't teach our kids well enough, and we don't do well enough, but you each have figured out ways to entertain yourself and are open enough to try out the other things that each other's interested in and be able to be like, all right, this could be fun for us, or it could just be fun for me. Yes. And it's a balance of those things. But it seems like you both have mastered the learning to entertain yourselves and then being entertained by each other, which also maintains you through the dark times and through the challenges. Also.
And I think also we will do something the other one wants to do if we know the other one really wants to do it. And if it doesn't work out, the other one won't sit home alone, and it won't, if one of us can't or doesn't want to do it, it doesn't keep the other one of us from doing it, and whoever's not doing it isn't sitting home watching the clock waiting for the other one to come home or involved.
Nice. So it's not dependent on the other person for you to be able to enjoy you.
Right. The other thing I've noticed, it seems like people have low tolerance for just random disagreements or just stupid stuff that happens. Everything is always so just.
But you can identify the difference between stupid stuff and not stupid stuff, and have some tolerance.
Yeah, and even if somebody does a total jerky thing, it doesn't always mean, oh, he's a loser, get out of here. But you need to be able to say that was a really jerky thing you did. But it's not that. Not everything is a deal breaker. It doesn't mean the entire person is a jerk, just a lapse of thought.
Which helps with dealing with stand-up comics, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And everyone else, too.
And everyone
else.
Which is wonderful. So, yeah, nice.
So you need to be able to say to somebody, I'm really upset by what you did. But you also can't be saying, I'm upset by what you did and I'm out of here.
Right. And I'm upset by what you did, but I'm not writing you off as who you are.
Right.
Also. So, all right.
Precisely.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
This was fun.
Thank you.
This was fun, and I appreciate all of your time, and I appreciate you being open about your relationship and the highs and lows of it also. So hopefully there's some stuff we can relate to and learn from it also. And if there's anything you want to plug or promote or anything additionally in here too, we'll give you a moment to do that, and then we'll wrap.
I'm going to be optimistic and say we're both in the funniest person in Rochester finals, and you should come out and see us for that.
Yes.
Yes.
June 30th.
All right. And
No,
if
the
not,
finals, because by the time
Oh,
this
the
hits,
finals,
yeah.
right, July.
I'm gonna be
Right by
super
the time it
optimistic.
hits.
that's
Oh, yeah. Yes. Ideally, we'll make it to the semifinals and then the finals.
and
And if we don't, we don't.
And if after that, there's other shows too that come out and
Absolutely.
enjoy you also.
We do comedy in our backyard.
Yes. We are going to have more.
Frequently featuring Kevin Markman.
Yes. We
Well,
produce
that-
comedy shows in our backyard, which are free. All you need to bring is a chair.
Mm-hmm.
And we provide free drinks. And we also will have more shows at the Little Theater and at Love and Cup. We don't have dates yet, but we will.
Nice. And check out you both on the radio.
Yes.
And
Yes.
doing that too. So thank
And
you
on
very
Google
much.
Maps.
Yes.
Scott and Lisa. Yes, and on Google Maps for me too. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it. This is Relationship Ready Talks, and come on back next time.
Thank you. I got worried your mic was off this whole time.